friends, welcome to Midlife. Today we will be studying about the nerve supply, interior of stomach and its functions. In the previous videos we have already discussed about the external features, relations, blood supply and lymphatic drainage of the stomach. Those who haven't watched it, please go and watch the part 1 and part 2 of the topic of stomach. So let us start with the nerve supply of stomach. So there are sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves. First we will see the sympathetic nerves. The sympathetic nerves are derived from T6 to T10 of the spinal cord via greater splanchnic nerves, celiac and hepatic plexuses, which travel along the artery supplying the stomach. So the functions of sympathetic nerves are vasomotor, that is constriction or dilation of blood vessels, motor to pyloric sphincter but inhibitory to the rest of gastric musculature, and it is the chief pathway for pain sensations from the stomach. Now let's talk about parasympathetic nerves. It is derived from vagi through esophageal plexus and gastric nerves. So the parasympathetic nerve is divided into anterior gastric nerve and posterior gastric nerve. Anterior gastric nerves contains mainly left vagal fibers, whereas posterior gastric nerve contains mainly the right vagal fibers. Anterior gastric nerve is divided into gastric branches and two pyloric branches. The gastric branches is from anterior surface of fundus and body of stomach, whereas two pyloric branches, one from pyloric antrum and another from pylorus. And the posterior gastric nerve divides into gastric branches, which is smaller, posterior surface of fundus body and pyloric antrum, whereas celiac branches is larger for celiac plexus. Let's see the functions of parasympathetic nerves. So these are motor and secretomotor to the stomach. Their stimulation causes increased motility of the stomach and secretion of gastric juice rich in pepsin and HCl. It is inhibitory to the pyloric sphincter. See the anterior gastric nerve, which is present on the anterior surface of the stomach. It is divided into several gastric branches and two pyloric branches. The thing which is important here is anterior nerve of Lateral. It arises from the gastric branches, but it supplies the pyloric part of the stomach, and this is the hepatic branch. In this figure we can see the posterior gastric nerve. It is generally present on the posterior aspect of the stomach, and it is divided into gastric branches and celiac branch. Here we can see it is the celiac ganglion, and from the posterior gastric nerve also arises posterior nerve of Lateral, which supplies the pylorus part. We will talk about the interior of the stomach. So there are 4 layers in the interior of the stomach, and they are mucosa, submucosa, also known as submucous coat, muscularis, also known as muscle coat, and serosa, that is known as serous coat. Now first let's talk about mucosa. Mucosa of an empty stomach is thrown into folds called as gastric rugae, and it is longitudinal along lesser curvature. It may be irregular elsewhere, and it is flattened in a distended stomach. On mucosal surface, numerous small depressions is seen, known as gastric pits. Gastric glands open into these pits. Part of the lumen of the stomach that lies along the lesser curvature and has longitudinal rugae is called as gastric canal or Megan stress. The gastric canal or magen stress allows rapid passage of swallowed liquids along the lesser curvature directly to the lower part before it spreads to other part of the stomach. Therefore, lesser curvature bears maximum insult of the swallowed liquids, which makes it vulnerable to the peptic ulcer. So, there are only three things in the layer of mucosa, which are gastric rugae, gastric pits, and gastric canal or magen stress. So we can remember this by using mnemonics such as G-cube. Now let's talk about the second layer of the stomach, that is submucous coat. It is made up of connective tissue, arterioles and nerve plexus. We can use the mnemonic such as CAN for submucous coat. Now the third layer is known as muscle coat. It is arranged as longitudinal fibers, inner circular fibers and oblique fibers. So we can remember this by using mnemonics such as LEO. And the longitudinal fibers is the most superficial one and mainly along the curvatures, that also lesser curvature. And the inner circular fibers encircle the body and it is thickened at pylorus to form the pyloric sphincter. So pyloric sphincter is basically muscle which is thickened at pylorus to form the pyloric sphincter. And next one is oblique fibers. Oblique fibers is the deepest layer. It loop over cardiac notch. Some fibers spread in fundus and body of the stomach. Rest form a well-developed ridge on each side of lesser curvature. On contraction, it forms gastric canal for passage of fluids. Lastly, the fourth layer of the interior of the stomach is known as serous coat and it consists of peritoneal covering. Now here we finished about the interior of the stomach. Now let's talk about some functions of stomach. So the stomach acts as a reservoir of food and as a mixture of food. By its peristalsis or peristaltic movements, it softens and mixes the food with gastric juice. Gastric glands produce gastric juice and hydrochloric acid. Gastric juice contains enzymes that play an important role in the digestion of food, whereas the hydrochloric acid destroys many organisms present in food and drinks. The lining cells of stomach produce abundant mucus which protects the gastric mucosa against the corrosive action of hydrochloric acid. Alcohol, water, salt and a few drugs are absorbed in the stomach. Stomach produces intrinsic factor of Cassel which helps in the absorption of vitamin B12. Here we can see the longitudinal folds in the body of the stomach. Generally the longitudinal folds is of mucous membrane, and here we can see the lesser omentum along the lesser curvature and greater omentum along the greater curvature, and this area is known as fundus of the stomach, and here it is the gastric canal. Here we can see these are the folds, these lines, these are the longitudinal folds. In this figure we can see the smooth muscle layers of the wall of stomach, that is here it is the outer longitudinal layer, this area, and this is the middle circular layer. Here we can see the innermost oblique layer, and this is the pyloric sphincter. Here we finished about the nerve supply, interior of stomach and the functions of stomach. Please like, share and subscribe for more videos, and please go back to watch part 1 and 2 for more understanding. Thank you.